China's COSCO shipping company has just opened a megaport on the coast of Peru, but it's faced some serious opposition from locals who say it's causing environmental harm and organizations that say it does nothing to support the global climate transition. At a time when many ports are trying to do everything they can to meet climate goals and be more environmentally friendly. But can a seaport even be sustainable to begin with? Coming up in our latest episode of Transforming Business. This $3.5 billion megaport just opened in Peru. It's the Chancay Terminal, and it's part of China's Belt and Road Initiative, the country's ambitious global infrastructure development strategy.
It marks the quality cooperation between Cambodia and China under the Belt and Road Initiative.
China's state-owned COSCO shipping company owns a majority 60% stake in the port. Peru's publicly held Vulcan Compañía Minera owns the rest, a partnership we'll get to a bit later. COSCO Shipping is also part owner in numerous terminals across Europe, Asia, the Middle East, and the Americas. COSCO says it intends for Chancay to be a major transport hub that will connect China to Peru and the rest of Latin America. COSCO says that a direct route from Chancay to Shanghai significantly reduces shipping time. A nearly 2-kilometer-long tunnel connects the port to the Pan-American Highway. Goods from China can arrive and be distributed more quickly. It has the potential to dramatically change Peru's economic reality, but not everyone is happy about it.
Para que el proyecto pueda operar, ha tenido que modificar toda la zona marino-costera. Y esa zona marino-costera estuvo destinada principalmente a sostener la actividad pesquera artesanal, ¿no?
Alejandro Chirinos leads environmental nonprofit Cooperación.
Todo eso ha sido removido. La remoción de los fondos marinos ha implicado pues devastar la zona donde los peces se encontraban en su espacio natural de reproducción, ¿no?
Of all infrastructure projects, ports have the biggest impact risk to its surrounding environment. More than roads, oil refineries, airports, power plants, and railways. But without ports, global trade, and the modern economic prosperity that comes hand in hand with it wouldn't exist. In a press statement, COSCO Shipping touts Chancay as its first green and smart port investment in South America. It points to a fleet of fully electric container trucks responsible for moving cargo around the port, and promises to establish wildlife rescue centers. COSCO says that Chancay aspires to become a hub port in Latin America, distinguished by its operational efficiency and dedication to green, low-carbon growth. But can a port exist in a way that isn't detrimental to the environment or local communities? That's a question that many in the sector are trying to answer. The global maritime industry is responsible for up to 3% of global carbon emissions. This may not seem like a lot, but in a global system where growth is central and an economy's key measure of success, it's a number that is expected to increase rapidly to 10% of global carbon emissions by 2050. Seaports have made big shifts recently, not only to reduce their carbon footprint, but to be a key driver of sustainability within the shipping sector. Even if a ship isn't ready to move away from fossil fuels, there are many other elements of port operations that are, like the cranes that move containers from ship to port and various utility vehicles. The biggest port in Europe and the biggest port outside Asia is the port of Rotterdam in the Netherlands. Because of its size, it's also the port that emits the most CO2 in the EU bloc, according to research agency Transport and Environment. But here on this 40-kilometer-long stretch of seaport, several green initiatives are underway.
Of the industrial area.
These pipes, for example, will bring carbon emissions captured from the port into a storage area, a depleted gas field, under the North Sea. Through this carbon capture system, the Port of Rotterdam says it will be able to store 37 million tons of CO2 that would have otherwise been released into the atmosphere.
We think that there's only one way to develop, and that's sustainable.
Nico van Duren from the Port of Rotterdam.
Because that's also the only way to get to an economic sustainable future is an environmental sustainable future.
Rotterdam's position as Europe's main hub puts it in a position to influence how other EU countries operate.
1/3 of all energy that is used in Germany passes through Rotterdam. And nowadays that's mainly fossil energy. And what we then said was, well, if you want to change this into renewable energy, we can offer supply chains for green hydrogen, which then can be transported into Germany.
Maritime industry experts are betting on hydrogen as the fuel of the future. But right now, most of it is made through a process that relies on fossil fuels. This site will soon be a plant for green hydrogen, which is made from clean energy. Another way that ports are trying to hit climate transition goals is providing vessels with onshore power. Onshore power, OPS as it's known in the industry, is kind of like a giant plug for ships, providing power to the vessel the same way the charging station does to an electric car. The Port of Stockholm in Sweden recently inaugurated its OPS for cruise ships.
Of systems on board the ships that need to be maintained, and instead of using their auxiliary engines and the fossil fuels, they use green electricity from the port.
Charlotta Solerud leads environmental strategy for the Port of Stockholm, where OPS became available to cruise vessels this year. The idea is that OPS systems will eventually allow all ships to use green energy while they're berthing at dock, because auxiliary engines that are kept running while berthed release toxic pollutants like sulfur and nitrogen dioxide. EU legislation requiring that member states meet certain climate goals by 2030 or 2050 are a big part of why ports across the continent are making changes. They have to. But these kinds of changes come with challenges.
They require quite big investments, both in the ports and also when it comes to the ships. They need to retrofit to be able to connect to the OPS. This year we received some EU funding for installation of OPS for the container ships in the port of Stockholm Norvik. So that's great news.
It's certainly a start, but according to the European Seaports Organization, the EU will need to invest at least 80 billion euros in greening port infrastructure in the next 10 years. Back in Peru, the shortage of funding to make green changes and the absence of climate transition policies are making it difficult for ports to make sweeping changes to how they operate.
En el Perú no tenemos los estímulos, digamos, ya sea por impuestos o por políticas que nos ayuden a ir en los procesos de descarbonización.
That's Sunny Rodriguez Cross, the Director of Safety, Environment, Sustainability at the Emirati company DP World. It operates the Callao terminal, about an hour south of COSCO's Chancay port. She says that despite a lack of regional regulation, the port is on a mission to reduce its carbon emissions by at least 90% by 2030.
Es una estrategia voluntaria. Y todo lo demás ha sido hecho con nuestros stakeholders directos, que son nuestros proveedores, y con nuestros empleados, que han sentido esa concientización y que quieren también ayudar, digamos, a que la empresa entre en un proceso de descarbonización.
In Chancay, the port does more than just strengthen the relationship between the two countries. It gives China direct access to Peru's valuable minerals, which includes copper, silver, and zinc. Experts say this is one example of how China is pairing transport and access to natural resources in a way that ensures its own strategic growth and control over the global mineral supply chain.
China is already heavily invested into the production of these minerals, as well as the refinery and further processing at home in China into further products.
Lea Tom is an international security and China expert.
So what we're seeing now is that China is linking these two things in Peru through becoming a transporter through the opening of Chancay port.
But those living next to Chancay say their efforts to make sure the port met environmental standards faced serious opposition.
Yo personalmente he sido atacada, ¿no?, por estas personas en una protesta. Me han empujado, me han correteado, me han quitado mi celular. Y solamente por el hecho de yo filmar y registrar.
Miriam lives next door to Chancay, literally. The walls of her home are adjacent to the Chancay port.
100 metros a 1 kilómetro, ¿no? Es la distancia de las voladuras con las viviendas y las personas es de 50 metros, 30 metros. Y entonces así es como hemos venido sufriendo de afectaciones con rajaduras a nuestras casas. Imagínate 6 días a la semana, 7 días a la semana, 2 a 3 veces por día. Es una cosa insoportable.
We've reached out to COSCO for a statement, but didn't hear back by the time this report went to air. And while the construction phase is over for this project, more broadly, critics often claim that China is not doing enough to make sure that its overseas infrastructure projects are in line with global climate goals. But not everyone agrees. Others have pointed out that by 2021, more than 50% of China's grant and loan financed infrastructure project portfolio in low and middle income countries had strong environmental and social safeguards in place.
I do see we will see both upticks in these positive factors such as employment, trade, automation, for example, at the port, which ultimately will make this more of a green port.
Every industry is looking at ways it can make its future more sustainable, but ports themselves are on the literal frontier of extreme weather events induced by climate change. So, as the gates to global trade, the catalyst to economic growth and development, it seems critical that ports are developed not only to withstand climate change, but not to feed it as well. What are your thoughts? Let us know in the comments.